Hello and welcome to Gentle Warriors, a series brought to you by Caregiver Saathi. Gentle Warriors is a series of stories which brings to light the journey of caregiving. I am your host, Jannat Baswani, and an intern at Caregiver Saathi. And I'm happy to welcome our guest for today, Attrika Hazarika. Attrika, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much, Jannat, for having me here. And thank you, Caregiver Saathi, for this opportunity to share a somewhat very integral part of my journey,
Mhm.
which is related to caregiving. Talking about a brief introduction. My name is Attrika. I hail from a city called Guwahati, which is in Assam, the northeast part of India. And by profession, I'm a sustainability consultant. And my interests are anything which involves creativity. As on today, I am busy doing some sort of gardening in my backyard. So, yeah, that is what is keeping me involved.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, diving right in, how or why did you become a caregiver? So, what's your story with caregiving?
Okay, so I never chose to become a caregiver, Jannat. I was born into a family where my sibling was is a mental health patient.
Mhm.
And back in the day, and I'm 36 years of age now, and I'm talking about a timeline of 1996, 1997, till 2012, that during that phase, um, caregiving was something that was not even understood as how we understand it today. And because of this particular situation, I just wanted to help. But
Mhm.
by virtue of helping, I
Yeah,
was actually playing the role of a caregiver because I was taking, you know, the responsibility of the emotional needs of my family. So
yeah,
that's how I kind of got into the role. Yeah.
yeah. So, like you said, you were not so cognizant of the fact that, you were stepping into a caregiving role, but you did it again by virtue of being in the family, etc. So, what were your thoughts and feelings, when you started becoming or realizing that you were a caregiver, and how have those feelings changed over time?
I'm talking about a space when I was so young. I was barely 12, 13 years old.
Okay. Yeah.
The sense of responsibility was very strong in me. Nobody imposed it on me.
Yeah.
Probably that's because I was the older child in the family, and most of self-induced responsibilities comes from the fact that you're the older one. That was one. Um, I remember very vividly, and I was raised in a boarding school, and so was my brother.
Hmm.
My nature was always this very enthusiastic kid, and I had very good friends. I had very good seniors, and somewhere, I was very, very distracted. But whenever I came home, the role kind of always switched, from this. So school was this place where I could be like a child, and where the entire pastoral care and the entire extracurricular activities, academics, sports, theater kept me very, very busy. But when I came back home, my role kind of switched. So at a very young age, I had to learn in a without any instruction. I had to dabble between this responsibility between a child and then a somewhat like a caregiver, because my brother, he could only connect to me in a way.
Hmm.
And like I said, like it was so inborn, so organic that I didn't know the boundaries and things like that, but I just took on the role as if fish takes into water.
Yeah.
But it was very, very helpless. If there were situations, there was no guidebook, there was no rule book, there was nobody to go to. There was also a phase of not being able to process my emotions, which were related to helplessness. I remember that very clearly,
Yeah.
just blanking out,
Hmm.
and just being in that phase of like, sab kuch mujhe karna hoga. I'll only have to figure it out. I'll have to figure it out
Yeah.
without knowing to who to go to.
Yeah.
Because counseling, psychological help. Those were like very, very like in not heard of at all, like totally not in the radar.
Yeah.
How has it changed today is, fast forward to good 15, 20 years, now every child, every parent is being made to be, made aware of, self-awareness is there about mental health.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of it is very, very correct, because there could be, because we're talking about it so much, sometimes it
Yeah.
tends to go to that side of marketing in a way, like, self-love, self-care, which, some of us are cognizant of. But
Mhm.
right now it's a lot better because, one doesn't need, I don't feel guilty
Yeah.
of, like, when I take care of my health first. So I
Yeah.
think that has been one of the biggest
Yeah.
change.
That's lovely. I mean, giving yourself an understanding that you also need your time. You also need to be able to love yourself. And I think, yeah, the way generations have moved past, especially in the last 10 years, I feel like, people are putting themselves and their care as more of a priority, which is extremely important when you're caring for somebody else. Um,
Right.
so would you like to share some of your challenges and frustrations along, your journey? If there's some that particularly stand out.
Yeah, I've said that a caregiver, now depending on what the person is taking care of, like, in my case it was mental health patient, and in other households it could be some other terminal illness related to cancer or schizophrenia. It could be anything for that matter. uh with any mental health patient, they come with their bouts of unpredictability.
Yeah.
So mood swings, unpredictability, unable to, comprehend what is it that they want, because they themselves are so vulnerable.
Yeah.
So there was this decade, I remember, Jannat, where I was just helpless.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize this thing a bit more, is
Mhm.
because, uh, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And it is a public health concern, because when I was doing my research, last few days, I wanted to know a bit more about caregiving and what it is like in India. We don't have data. We Caregiving as a concept, it's discussed at a much later stage, and
Yeah.
that also in the context of nursing.
Yeah.
Nursing facilities are there, and they'll give you a specialist or a nurse who will take care of. But what about those people who have witness caregiving,
Mhm.
the responsibility of a caregiver at a very young age? What do you do about that? So we don't have data, we don't have information, we don't have enough stakeholders talking about it.
Yeah.
We only talk about the institutional caregiving at a much, much later stage. But what about the helplessness and the anxiety and the depression that caregivers face in their formative years, whether it is because I faced it at such an early age in school. So that was one. And uh, you feel like your emotions, I at a very later stage in my life had to understand, there are different nuances to emotions, because after a particular period of helplessness and tiredness and exhaustion, you just feel exhausted. You don't I don't know how I went through that phase of 10, 12 years where I was just going to work, and of course, I had very good friends. I was blessed with good friends. I was blessed with good workplaces where they
Yeah.
somewhat understood about the situation. But but still, 90% was just, tiredness and lethargy and unable to process emotions, and not knowing, that, certain things are, you know it's okay to be not okay. For example, it's okay to feel tired, because I was always on a mission to, find solutions where the solutions were not around me. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of tiredness and a lot of helplessness. And like I said, um, I was also growing up in those formative years, from a child to a teenage to an adolescent to an adult,
Yeah.
not being able to process my emotions very clearly, because of that, a lot of anger, a lot of irritability,
Mm.
not knowing when to take breaks and just doing what you're supposed to be doing. Nobody also telling me, बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है, take a break, or you cannot do everything on your own. Nobody was there, to tell me that.
Yeah.
So those bouts of frustration is very, very real, and it's very, very challenging for a
Yeah.
caregiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like you mentioned, that majority of this frustration and helplessness came at a very young age. So when was sort of the turning point for you to be, to recognize those issues and, take that time for yourself and actually figure those emotions out that you hadn't?
Yeah, I would say very, very late into my life. I got into therapy at the age of 32, 33 for a completely different reason, actually. It was to do with the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And, a very dear aunt of mine, Madhu auntie, she said that, like it's time for you because you have been brave and you have been a warrior for so long. I think you should just like relax now. And then she kind of showed me she connected me to a very good therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when one thing led to the other. The tip of the iceberg was obviously the immediate problem of a relationship breakup, but then gradually I found so much of solace and so much of ease and so much of calmness when I was just one conversation kept leading to the other.
Yeah.
But it was the overall iceberg was tiredness, just tiredness. And when somebody of that caliber, and therapists also, they give you a sheer validation that
Yeah.
if a friend tells you take a break, you may not be listening to him or her attentively as much as the therapist would do. And then
Yeah.
when she told me, that you really need to have self compassion towards yourself, acknowledge the kind of work that you're put into, because it's all unpaid work. Caregiving is the it's given that the family members have to take care, and the family members will 99% of the time will not even have the skill set, the tools, the resources, the awareness, the understanding of what they're doing, but they're just doing it because they're a family member. So when that entire intervention came and it was like so well timed, I felt a lot of like emotional regulation happening within me. I could cry at ease. I could um, just be myself sometimes, even if I didn't have an answer, because earlier there was always this danda on my head that I only have to find an answer and I have to be the person to find you
Yeah.
know a solution to the mental health thing. And I thought that everything was treatable, curable, and also all those awareness and all that acknowledgement came that
Yeah.
some things are within my control and something is not within my control. Now what do you do? So
Yeah.
those very clear things were shared with me, which I needed a long time ago. Probably I would have been a lot easier. But
Mhm.
then, life has its own way of unfolding.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think self compassion and yoga are the two things which really kind of brought about a lot of ease into my life, definitely.
That's lovely. So like you mentioned, obviously with therapy, there's a lot of stuff that you learned about yourself, things that you may not have uncovered for a really long time. But through your caregiving journey, what were the most important things you learned, from that experience? Were there any specific insights that you feel like other caregivers could really benefit from?
Jannat, whenever I kind of break down my journey, and of course,
Yeah.
there's like so much to share, but I have to be cognizant of the fact that this is a interview and this is a specific platform.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned is that, the care, first thing is that, the caregiver
Mm-hmm.
has to be somewhat, the concept of caregiving has to be recognized
Yeah. Yeah.
by everybody.
Absolutely.
And when I say everybody, I mean the society.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point sometimes, what is the point of the caregiver knowing that, I'm a caregiver, I'm caregiving, but, the society is expecting something different from you. And you will every individual will come into, at some point or the other, will come into the different facets of the ecosystem, whether it's school, whether it is college, whether it is workplace, whether it is marriage, but whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, certain things we take for granted, like with absolute respect and sympathy towards the patient,
Yeah.
but caregiving, the expectation that, and I'm not talking about only myself, I'm talking about caregivers where they have to nurse, where wives and mostly women, even men, where
Yeah.
they're just expected to, like, take care of the patient and do the work and look after the children and do the household and do the finance. There are days where you can't process, there are weeks, there are years where you can't process, you can't think straight, you
Yeah.
become numb. Okay, and that is the mental strain I wanted to highlight that a caregiver goes through,
Yeah.
because you're literally taking the responsibility of the hospital, and
Yeah.
you're doing it unpaid, and you're doing it at the cost of your own health. So
Yeah.
what is it caregiving? Caregiving means, first of all, you take care of yourself, right? But then you are completely bypassing that and you're taking care of another individual. And the
Mhm.
moment you take care of yourself, you feel a sense of guilt and sense of judgment, which is 100% is there in most of us, right? Because caregiving as a concept has not been discussed or even talked about in circles. So first and foremost is we need to really recognize the mental expectations, the drain, the strain that comes along with it. It is not something to glorify.
Yeah.
It is unfortunate, number one. Number two is that, the caregiver
Mhm.
needs to be told that there is an alternate life. This is not something which is, that is not how you define your life. I remember when I was very young, I thought that, this is what it is. There's no other definition, there's no other alternative, there's no, this is what it is, and this is how it will always be.
Mhm.
But gradually, when I kind of, at a much later stage, I
Mhm.
kind of read and I kind of saw the stories, where the caregivers have had alternative, more dignified life,
Mhm.
just by following certain practices, following certain, very, very healthy guidelines, very simple and healthy guidelines. They were able to balance, if not perfectly, but at least, managing the word here I want to emphasize is you can manage. So it is, one is recognition of the concept of caregiving. Second is that, the caregivers need to be really, really empowered, that, there's an alternative, dignified life that is awaiting them. They just need to shift their focus. And it's very hard, it's not very easy, but gradually with support, they can. The third is, like, the ecosystem. The
Yeah.
ecosystem has to be very, very inclusive of
Yeah.
the fact that there is a category of people, and it is so prominent, and it is so, every household must be having somebody to be looked after. It can be your grandmother, it can be, the nature of caregiving can be a bit different from household to household, but everybody is doing it. So the ecosystem has to be a lot more empathetic towards the caregiving aspect, you
Yeah.
know. So these three things can actually make it a bit more, livable, you
Yeah.
know, for caregivers. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, like managing and being able to manage. How did you manage your other responsibilities towards whether that's work, other family members, along with your caregiving journey?
Okay. So the way I manage, like, there is no structured
Right.
way. I had to learn. It was all self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can break it down again into phases. Like, when I was growing up, I didn't know, I was very distracted. The focus was always to do well, and then, and also be like a good child. Now, again, no judgments here. I was doing it because that's what kind of made me afloat, and that was basically, the only way that I.
Mm-hmm.
But gradually, when I kind of grew up and all of that, like, I had to be very, very honest with myself.
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah.
I saw that this is actually taking a toll on my health,
Yeah.
I kind of stepped back.
Yeah.
Yes, it did not happen in like a week or a month. The years of, it kind of evolved. But But after therapy, it became much more clear that whatever is cannot be done by you or by the doctors, because eventually, it is what it is. Like, you can only do as much. You can give medicines, you can give X amount of help. You can, by being the caregiver, you can motivate to a particular point. But the thing is that, we are also human beings. We should know where the threshold is. I think that's when you realize that, you need to take care of yourself. So those very hard hitting, hard hitting concepts, once that's made clear to you, I think that kind of helped me to manage. Also, I read a lot. I really, really read, and I really, really, um, you know, Jannat, I had two good friends. I want to mention them in today's conversation. One is Ronmi Bora. Like, she also comes from a family, with her own challenges of where she also had to play a role of a caregiver. She was very supportive, and our kind of support towards each other was very, very spiritual at that stage, because we were very, very young, and that's the first thing you basically go to. You go to a divine force to kind of give you the strength. But nevertheless, like, now we know that it's spirituality and psychology that helps, but then nevertheless, it did do its work. We did get hope. And the other friend I really want to thank is Vrinda Marwa. So she is my college friend, and with her very good awareness around, like, she was just a sensitive human being, and towards situations like this, and also the fact that she's in the space of gender and development. So probably those aspects also, those exposure also really, really helps a person to become a lot more, like, understanding towards these things. And in general also, like, just giving some great pep talk and some great perspective from time to time, that you are doing a lot. So because the rest of them were also children, the rest of them also didn't know what caregiving, self-awareness, self-love, whatever it is that we know today, they didn't know what could they do. But these two girls, and they were very intuitively guided, so they knew that I needed a lot support, so they did check on me from time to time. So yes, so I think, few friends, a lot of curiosity around, what is it exactly that I should do, the
Yeah.
need to take care of oneself. Most of it was intuitively led, but then this is how I managed, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you mentioned, you are very glad to have had, the support system of these two great friends. But aside from them, um, how, did you find help from others? If you asked for help from others in this caregiving journey, was it difficult asking for help or receiving the help? Um, a lot of times people think, okay, you're caring for family. What is the need to ask for help? Was there any situations like that that you encountered?
you know very frankly speaking, I didn't ask for help.
Right.
uh, I I just thought that this is something that I need to shoulder upon.
Yeah.
That was like the worst thing, now that I look back. Also, I mean, worst thing is that, what if it's not even out of judgments. It was just somebody should, the whole feeling of, somebody will listen to me, that also doesn't come to your mind, because you just feel that you should be able to figure it yourself.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
ecosystem, the awareness, like I said, it was negligent, not there.
Yeah.
The fact that caregiver, first of all, I didn't know if I was a caregiver. I didn't know that would the other person also will be okay to hear, because life was very, very busy. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
it was not even discussed third.
Yeah.
It was not.
Right.
um I, I I would talk to my mom, and I
Mhm.
would talk to my dad, and we would discuss it amongst ourselves, like, when will things get better. But that was all. And then, of course, we also have a very supportive family,
Yeah.
my extended family. They also didn't know what to do, but they were just there, like, telling us that it'll get better. But Jannat, this is what I wanted to say, that the concept of caregiving needs to be spoken very clearly,
Yeah.
is that most of the Indian households, we kind of, for every right reason, we first go to God,
Yeah.
and we pray, and it is good to pray. But
Mhm.
then we, at the same time, with spirituality, has to come with adequate skill set, adequate awareness, adequate knowledge about what is happening, you know, so that we can, if not 100%, the 100% of solution will not happen. That's because, most of the times caregiving is rooted out of, like, an unresolved situation, like a terminal illness and all. But there needs to be conversations.
Mhm.
People need to know that this is also a category of people who need to be heard. And even if they don't need to, like, just saying that, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
There was a time, if you remember, like before the criminalization of, like, the entire 360 article and all of that, we didn't know what LGBTQIA plus was.
Yeah.
But now there's a lot of conversation because there's so many narratives and so many conversations around it that probably even our grandmothers are okay with it right now. They also acknowledge the fact that it's okay that if you are born that way.
Yeah.
But how did it happen? It was decades of conversation. There was so much information, and there was multi-stakeholder participation in this conversation, that this is a particular problem in our thought process. We kind of need to accept them for who they are. So I don't have all the answers with me, but I do know that everything begins with awareness, you know. So so that the caregivers don't feel the pressure of, shouldering all the responsibilities financially, emotionally, everything upon them. And the closest country which comes to acknowledging caregiver, the whole
Mhm.
concept, is Canada, because they basically provide courses
Mhm.
for people who wants to take up a course in caregiving, and they get paid for it.
Yeah.
So through this mechanism also, people know that, okay, there is something like this that they can go to.
Yeah.
If the family caregiver cannot shoulder the responsibility anymore, and if they do have a financial help, they can go to somebody,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I think we need to really make every institution, every aspect in the ecosystem empathetic and aware of the fact that, they need help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is also, I know you've mentioned, but the guilt that so many caregivers feel, or, the burden that they put, believe that they have to shoulder themselves. I think this is a great platform also to share with those caregivers that you don't have to do that. You may feel like that, and it's hard to get over that step of, believing that you have to hold it all together. But it is a journey, and, we hope with this interview and many others like this that it opens up that awareness channel. um, so
Yeah.
I know you've mentioned that, you were not in control of a lot of situations, and a lot of situations were stressful. But was there anything specifically that, you did that that did sort of reel in the confidence and control in stressful situations?
Um, I think being engaged in activities,
Mhm.
I was doing my regular, like, swimming or aerobics,
Yeah.
having like hobbies, that kind of thing. I don't know about controlling my, like, because there was a lot of my, the years that I've spent has been always outside home.
Hmm.
Like I said, that I would come back home and then I would again switch on to the role of a caregiver. But then uh, it was, most of the time it was like managing the whole strain, like, at home, and then also being able to have that focus and the drive and the enthusiasm at work. So
Yeah.
how did I do that? I kind of, I took care of myself.
Yeah.
I never compromised on my sleep.
Yeah.
uh, and I didn't know, again, I was not doing it, like, again, in a very structured way, but I was doing it because I want to take care of myself.
Yeah.
I slept really well. I kind of kept myself engaged in some physical activity. I do it more consciously now, which is yoga, and I do things that I like doing now. I think that really helps a person to, just lead like reorient your life to things that you are good at and that you're capable of making a difference, or whatever is of interest to you. It doesn't always have to be very earth shattering, but it can be just something which you like doing. So yeah, I mean, just keeping my focus on few things, but things which I like doing is something that I have kept myself, you know, occupied. Gardening, writing, and recently I've started going for theater workshops as well. So having those activities and not being in that frame of, the panic mode, or because it has taken many, many, many years of, removing that, that entire strain.
Mhm.
Your nervous system actually also goes for a toss with prolonged stress and prolonged, like, trauma.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference, like, there's this tiredness continuously, and then you don't feel enthusiastic, or you don't feel like looking forward to for days. So how do you break that? How do you break that? So you need to, like, go out, and you need to, like, the more you go out, spend time with nature.
Mhm.
Very, very essential for anybody who is having, like, very, very tough, like, cycle or phase. Nature really, really heals you. We all know about that.
Yeah.
Trips, go out and just see, like, see what is happening, which is not just constrained to what is happening at home, but also see how are other people living, how are other, you need to be exposed to ways of living, how others are dealing as well. Otherwise you only feel as if this is how, you define your home, the lifestyle, as what it is, like, sacrosanct. But no, there are many people, the way they are dealing with things can also be sometimes source of inspiration. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think lastly, would you like to share some joyful moments as, through that journey or a little bit after the journey of caregiving that, maybe kept you going while, you know, you were part of your caregiving journey?
To be very, very honest, well, the I never had the opportunity of making my caregiving experience a joyful one. It was very, very stressful.
Yeah.
uh, I had to be on the edge, and so did my parents,
Mhm.
without having to name and shame anybody.
Yeah.
It was very, very exhausting.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say that, things are a lot easier
Mhm.
when we kind of shoulder the responsibilities,
Yeah.
divide the responsibilities with each other. It doesn't have to be just my parents or just me.
Yeah.
And communication is a lot more freer. Nobody judges each other. Let's say tomorrow, if my parents want to go somewhere, I volunteer and I say that, I'll be at home, you all go. So that understanding, that shouldering, that dividing of responsibility, kind of just eases the burden.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is what has made us kind of a lot more, like, we can manage it a lot more easily than
Mm.
before.
Yeah. All right, then. Thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your story with us. Um, and to the audience members as well, everybody is in unique situations and everybody deals with things differently. But I hope that this episode helps share some insight to, especially giving yourself the love and reminding yourself that it's not always all going to be on your shoulders. You have shoulders to lean on as well. Thank you so much, Atrika.
Thank you so much, Jannat, and thanks once again to Bhavna and Caregiver Saathi for this platform. And you all are doing an amazing work. And I just hope that, you all are more and more heard of by families, by institutions, by places where, caregiving becomes a, a very, like, well heard concept. So, yeah, all the best.